They were young, still too young to vote, too young to legally drink. They lived in modest houses, walked to school, cracked jokes in the hallway, and played like everyone else. They had mothers who loved them, friends who trusted them, neighbors who nodded and waved. But there was something else, something hidden beneath the surface of normalcy. They weren't sneaking out for cigarettes or skipping class to play video games. They were architects of horror. Case 1. The Candyman's Apprentice. Elmer Wayne Henley Jr., 17, Houston, Texas. In the early 1970s, the air in Houston was thick with more than humidity. A deep, unspoken fear had taken root. Boys were disappearing, dozens of them, clean-cut, athletic, polite. Some from happy homes, others from broken ones, but all vanishing without a trace. The assumption was runaways, but they never came back. By 1971, the pressure was mounting. Desperate parents pleaded, and newspapers printed rows of young faces under the headline, "Missing." There were no bodies, no crime scenes, no answers. Unnoticed in a plain house on a plain street, a man named Dean Corll watched it all, calm, patient, smiling. He was unassuming, with a tidy appearance and a soft voice. He handed out candy, offered rides, and gave cash to teens for odd jobs. People called him the Candy Man. But Dean Corll wasn't working alone. Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. was 15, a bit wild but polite, the kind of kid who knew how to keep a secret. He met Corll and at first didn't understand the man's true nature. Or perhaps he did, and said nothing. The first time Henley helped lure a boy to Corll's house, he told himself it was for the money. But the lies unravel quickly when the dead begin to speak. Henley didn't stop. He kept bringing more. The boys were drugged, restrained, tortured, and murdered. Their bodies were buried in storage lockers, on remote beaches, in shallow graves. For years, this continued unnoticed. Henley's role evolved from watcher to participant. He held victims down. He waited outside closed doors. He always knew. By 16, he had helped Corll murder multiple boys. Some were even his friends. Then on August 8, 1973, something broke. Inside Corll's home, another boy was tied down. This time, Henley hesitated. He argued. Corll turned on him, screaming threats. In a burst of panic or rage, Henley picked up a .22 caliber revolver and fired 6 times. Corll fell, blood pooling around him. Then Henley did the unexpected. He called the police. "Y'all better come," he told the dispatcher. "I killed a man." When officers arrived, Henley led them on a ghastly tour. He showed them where victims were tied, where tools were hidden. He directed them to storage units and boat sheds. They dug and dug and dug. They uncovered 28 bodies, each showing signs of brutal, methodical execution. Houston was paralyzed. The Candyman was dead, but the teenager who helped him was alive. At his trial, Henley smiled for cameras and laughed in the courtroom. Witnesses described him as cold and empty. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms and has been denied parole more than 20 times. He insists he only acted to survive, that he turned on Corll to stop the killing. But for the families of the vanished boys, there are no excuses, only the echo of final screams and the face of the 17-year-old who helped bury them. Case 2. The Beaumont Butcher, Robert Wayne Daniels, 17, Beaumont, Texas. Beaumont was a city of oil fields, refineries, and quiet neighborhoods where the loudest sound was a passing train. It was the kind of place where everyone knew someone and strangers were noticed. Robert Wayne Daniels, 17, wasn't someone teachers worried about. He didn't fail classes or start fights. He carried silence. He lived with his grandmother, walked to the store, and kept to himself. In the spring of 1995, Beaumont changed. On April 12th, a retired couple was found murdered in their home. The husband was slumped in his recliner, stabbed multiple times. His wife lay in the hallway, her throat slashed with shocking violence. No forced entry, nothing stolen. 2 weeks later, a 16-year-old girl was found behind an abandoned mechanics shop. Same pattern, multiple stab wounds. The ferocity stunned investigators. There was no connection between the victims. The media called it random. The police called it concerning. Hidden under Robert's mattress was a spiral notebook. On the cover, one word: cleansing. Inside, pages were filled with repetitive phrases, diagrams, drawings of knives, and sketches of bodies marked with red X's. He wrote, "The world is rotting. I am the solution." On May 7th, a jogger was stabbed to death near a drainage ditch, the third murder in 4 weeks. The town grew restless. Parents walked children to school. Security lights sold out. Then, the killer made a mistake. Daniels returned to the elderly couple's home, standing too long near the police tape. When questioned, he gave a false name. It didn't sit right. They brought him in. In the interrogation room, Daniels didn't ask for a lawyer. He confessed to all 4 murders, reciting dates, methods, and his victims' last words. When asked why, he paused. "They were wasting space," he said. It was his only explanation. He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read. The press coverage was brief. The O.J. Simpson trial dominated the news. But in Beaumont, the scars never faded. As one officer noted, "I've seen grown men commit murder, but that boy, he wanted to." Case 3. The Firestarter. Krista Carty, 16, San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio, 2009. A call came in just after 2 a.m. A single-story home was engulfed in flames. Inside, firefighters found 81-year-old Mary Louise Benton trapped and alone. The fire had been set intentionally. 2 weeks later, a 6-year-old boy collapsed in his family's living room. His death was slow and silent, caused by antifreeze deliberately mixed into his juice boxes. The connection between the 2 deaths led investigators to Krista Carty, 16. A soft-spoken, straight-A student, she volunteered at the library. Teachers called her exceptional. Neighbors called her quiet. When they brought her in, she didn't deny it. Her eyes were empty. A search of her room revealed dozens of notebooks neatly organized. Inside were graphic descriptions of death, fire, poison, suffocation. One entry, dated 2 days before the fire, read, "It's time to try it. If it works, I'll know I was right." When asked why, Krista blinked and said, "I wanted to know what it felt like to take something that couldn't be given back." Psychologists found no significant disorder, no psychosis. She understood what she did. She just didn't care. At her trial, she showed no reaction to autopsy photos or weeping families. She was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. A relative said, "She didn't kill out of rage. She planned it, watched it burn. That's what scares me most." Case 4. The Unnamed Predator. Zane, 16, North Texas. Between 2006 and 2008, a series of what seemed like tragic accidents appeared in the back pages of North Texas news. A pedestrian struck near a freeway ramp. A homeless man found dead on a service road. Then another, and another. They were called unavoidable, random, unrelated, but they weren't. The victims shared nothing in common except their invisibility: the old, the poor, those walking alone at night. One detective noticed a pattern. The third victim had been dragged 40 feet. The skid marks suggested intent, not panic. A break came when a 15-year-old girl witnessed a car swerve on purpose. Her testimony led police to a local teen, Zane. His last name was sealed by juvenile law. He was calm, cooperative, and smiled during questioning. He said he liked driving at night, that the city looked cleaner. Then he said, "Sometimes I just like watching people fall." A search of his room revealed a hand-drawn map with dots and dates corresponding to the deaths. He called them targets. He told investigators he started with animals, grew bored, and wanted to try something harder. Zane was charged with 4 counts of murder. Because he was a minor, his records were sealed, and he was committed to a psychiatric facility until he turned 21. As he was led away, he smiled and said, "This was just practice." Case 5. The Obsession Club. Ritual killers of East Texas, 2012. A small town of fewer than 4,000 people, one high school, one grocery store, and a deep sense of safety. That safety shattered when 4 teenagers formed a group they called the Obsession. Behind their school in the woods, they built a den, a tarp-covered pit circled by rocks. They killed animals, filmed it, and made offerings. Then they escalated. They began choosing people, loners, quiet kids, from the yearbook. On March 14, 2013, they invited 15-year-old Michael, a boy who liked comics and had asthma, to meet them in the woods. He never came home. His body was found 2 days later, stabbed 67 times. Symbols were drawn on his chest, the same symbols found in the lockers of the 4 teens. The youngest member, 14, cracked and confessed to a teacher. The arrests followed. 3 boys and 1 girl, aged 14 to 17, admitted everything, proudly. They described the rituals, the chants, the fire. One smiled and said the victim was willing. He just didn't know it yet. The community was paralyzed. The trials were sealed. Only one was tried as an adult. The rest were sent to juvenile detention. They're all out now. Names changed, records expunged. Michael's mother still lights a candle for him every Friday. She doesn't blame media or games. She blames belief, twisted, shared, and weaponized. Case 6. The Good Son, Joshua Bowden, 16, Levelland, Texas. Levelland, 2017. A flatland city of cotton fields and college football, where life moved predictably. Joshua Bowden, 16, was the town's golden boy, well-mannered, an honor student, a churchgoer who played guitar at youth group. Teachers adored him. Coaches called him reliable. Then girls began to disappear, one after another, all from his school, all female. The town panicked. No one suspected Joshua. A teacher noticed he was always early, always alone, and looked hollow. Security footage showed a figure with a crescent-shaped scar on his hand, the same scar Joshua had. When police brought him in, he didn't protest. In a shed behind his grandparents' property, they found the remains of 3 girls, neatly stacked. Beside them, journals documented everything. Joshua wrote of the thrill of silence and how pretending to be good was the easiest part. When confronted, he didn't cry. He said, "I was tired of being good." He was sentenced to life without parole. In his Bible, a note was found, "The devil's loud, but I was quiet, and no one ever noticed." The town was left shattered, looking over its shoulder, forever wondering how they missed the darkness behind the smile. These are the stories that stayed buried. Teenagers who didn't lose control but took it. They sat in our classrooms, walked our streets, and passed us in hallways. Was justice served? Could anything have prevented this? The answers are not simple, but silence is how monsters survive. The only way to stop the next one is to ensure we never forget the last.